Welcome to the VHIA Weekly Update, episode number 10. I'm Stuart McCullough, I'm the CEO of VHIA. For this week's Industrial Roundup, we'll start with community health. The 15th of March sees the second of our monthly HR/IR managers meetings for this group. We've been greatly encouraged by the degree of participation by standalone community health members. This will be the first time that we use a hybrid approach of having some members attend in person and go to meeting. But we're determined just to make sure that people have an opportunity to participate in that as a regular meeting on the third Wednesday of every month. On the 17th of March, we are scheduled to meet with the Allied Health Professionals Union. The reason for that meeting is that they have logged a small number of employers to date for a new enterprise agreement. There are some materials already on our website that you can access to see what those logs of claim are, and we'll be having a preliminary meeting and discussion with the union on that day. But most importantly of all, we'll be discussing the operating environment that community health centres now find themselves in, having regard for the significant changes arising from the NDIS and My Aged Care. With regards to our acute members, we are commencing this week our regional forums. This is something that we'll do each March and each September, and will be a useful opportunity for us to engage directly with members. We're starting this round of regional forums in Ballarat on Thursday, the 16th of March. The agenda has been circulated, and we'll be using that time to get feedback from members with regards to the ANMF's submissions to the Safe Patient Care Act Task Force. We'll also be seeking feedback with regards to a proposed family violence leave guideline. That is a guideline that's being developed in order to support the application of the family violence leave clauses that appear across our agreements. We'll also be using those forums to provide an overview of the amended disciplinary clauses. This week we also have a meeting with the AMA to further bargaining with regards to new agreements for doctors in training and for specialists. That's it for this week's Industrial Roundup. Welcome to the VHIA Weekly Update discussion. I'm joined this week by Industrial Relations Consultant Emma Scott. Emma, welcome.
Thank you. Because
this is your first time doing one of the podcasts, you get the honour of revealing our subject box for today.
Now I'm pretty excited.
So for those people who are listening to this rather than viewing it, could you describe to people what it is you see?
It's a HP sauce bottle.
HP sauce. So HP, symbolic of health professionals, or standing for health professionals, and today we're going to be discussing the source document, the Allied Health Professionals Agreement. Emma, just in terms of the new Allied Health Professionals Agreement, presently that's lodged with the Commission?
Yes, it is.
So it's been subject to a ballot, and really it's just awaiting a process by which it can be approved.
Yes, correct. We did follow up the Commission probably about a week and a half ago, and it hasn't yet been allocated to a Commissioner, and that's because they've had a number of applications prior to Christmas and in January. So they said it could be possibly between another 3 to 5 days, business days, to get allocated to a Commissioner, and then a further possible 5 business days for the Commissioner to look at it, and they would either need further information or would be able to approve the document by e-hearing.
So it seems that everybody in industrial relations seeks to get their documents lodged just before Christmas.
Yes, and that's exactly what we did.
And in terms of the new Allied Health Professionals Agreement, what are some of the key changes that arise from that document?
Well, one of the main key changes is the classification and wages structure. And then that also includes a classification process and reclassification process. So the current agreement doesn't clearly outline what's to occur for that. And so now there's a process that's clear and transparent for everybody on when someone might make an application or when they should ask for an application for reclassification. There's also a new safe staffing and workload clause. So that's going to be quite a big change in terms of monitoring safe staffing and workload. And also there's a revised backfill and advertising clause.
Just in terms of some of the common provisions which have been included in the Allied Health Professionals Agreement, that's a bit of a significant change for Allied Health Professionals in that a lot of their terms around process were a little bit different to everybody else's.
Yes, they were. So there was an arbitration in 2009, and the last agreement that is current really didn't change any of those, and it was just a rollover agreement with changes to really the wages, and then there was a classification review, which is known as the Clause 11.
The infamous Clause 11.
Yes, the infamous Clause 11. So that was done, but that was just changes to classification. So say, for example, the discipline clause, that is something that a lot of people know about in the current nurses agreement, but that has been replicated in the Allied Health Professionals agreement. So although it might not be a change in the nurses space, it's definitely a change in the Allied Health Professional space for following a proper extended disciplinary process.
One of the key takeouts for me with regards to those common provisions is the dispute resolution procedure. Allied health professionals were the only group that didn't have a right of arbitration under their agreement. That's now been rectified with the new agreement, I understand.
Yes, that is correct.
And in terms of the changes from the new agreement, what are some of the helpful changes for employers?
As you mentioned just before, I think that consistency is one of the major good changes. Obviously, we weren't able to get complete consistency, but we're in the step of a right direction in trying to get consistency for those procedural clauses like the consultation, the dispute resolution and disciplinary clause. There's also a change to the fixed term clause. Now, although what we got in the fixed term clause wasn't quite where we wanted it, it does still have some improvements in it for employers in terms of there are some exceptions where you can do longer than 2 years, whereas previously it was really just 1 year and 2 years for someone that was on parental leave.
Just in terms of the fixed term issue, that was a major apprehension on the part of the union. Is that one of the items that will be the subject of an implementation process or review by an implementation committee?
Yes, so what we're trying to do is still focus during the life of the agreement and keep the reference groups going during it so that we can start to work out, well, how does the clause work or how it doesn't work. So during the life we can put some good evidence forward that says, well, the fixed term clause doesn't work because this is a true fixed term arrangement and some people aren't getting employment in that because even the new agreement, because it does still have restrictions, it still causes some concerns in being able to employ people under the enterprise agreement, which is what we want.
And just in terms of something like change of shift, the old change of shift provision was quite limited in terms of the number of exceptions that it had.
Yes, so we've got another 2 exceptions in the new agreement. One of them is about an intervening period of 2 weeks of leave. A lot of other agreements have 48 hours. We were unable to get 48 hours, but we were able to get 2 weeks of intervening leave between the change of shift. Change of shift would no longer be applicable. And then we also were able to put in if the employee requests a change to the roster that causes a change of shift would no longer be applicable.
And with respect to annual leave, there were some fairly unique provisions with respect to the requirement to take annual leave at direction of the employer. Have those changed?
Yes, they have. So previously there used to be a notice period of 13 weeks before you could direct someone to take leave. That's now been reduced to 10 weeks. And then also the amount of hours that an employee needs to have before you can ask them to take annual leave. It's been made pro rata for part-time employees.
One of the points that both ourselves and VHIA have a very strong view on is the need for people to get their annual leave entitlements. And so hopefully those changes will support that objective.
Correct, yes.
In terms of the general shape of the agreement and the redrafting process.
Mm-hmm. So a significant amount of time was spent on the redrafting. So again, like the other agreements, it's quite close to them in terms of where clauses sit. There's also some little changes that I think are small but make it a lot easier to navigate. So in the classification schedule, there's a clear alphabetical list of the different professions that are covered under that agreement. There's also in one of the classification schedules a clear table that outlines the relevant entry points for the different occupations. And then also, say for example, the allowances are separated into separate allowance clauses, whereas previously they were just under the allowances clauses and Those little things I feel like will help everybody be able to navigate the agreement easier, including myself.
So in terms of the big changes, in particular changes to classifications, what was the reason for the change to classifications?
Really, the reason for the changes to the classifications was that, number one, it was a key concern for VHIA, and it was key to their campaign and their dinosaur campaign, talking about how the structure was prehistoric. Now, the structure really hadn't been changed since the 2009 arbitration, so they did some tweaking in the 2009 arbitration, and then we had the Clause 11 review, and that only tweaked some classifications, not a total, I guess, overhaul, which is where we have got to for the AHP1, which is the Allied Health Professionals, that were previously known as UG1 health professionals.
So the artist formerly known as UG1.
Correct.
And so what's the biggest change when it comes to the classifications?
So the biggest change in terms of classifications rather than increments, I would say, would be that the chief and deputy chief structure going into the grade 3 and grade 4 structure. And they've also been renamed the Allied Health Managers and Assistant Allied Health Managers.
So the reason for that change in nomenclature away from chief?
Is because no one uses that terminology.
So that terminology was seen to be somewhat outdated?
Yes, that was prehistoric.
And in terms of other changes, including the advanced practice structure?
Yes, so the advanced practice structure is going to be a big one, and going to be a big one on our implementation and practical issues that come from that. So the grade 1s can't be doing advanced practice. Now, we're obviously aware, and VHIA is aware, that advanced practice at the different hospitals will mean different things depending on how far along that service is. So the outcome won't be the same at every hospital.
I think for me, with regards to the advanced practice, we were greatly assisted by input from allied health managers, but there were very different views as to advanced practice. And I think one of the challenges for the new agreement will be really to monitor the impact,
Yes.
whether or not it's working to support people as they develop through advanced practice, whether it's working as a disincentive, just to get an idea of what effect it has, so that it's in everybody's interests to ensure that advanced practice succeeds.
Yes, correct. What ended up in the enterprise agreement wasn't exactly what we wanted, but it's a step to start to then get some evidence to really push something next time.
But we will be consulting on an ongoing basis with allied health managers to gauge the effect of that provision.
Correct.
And in terms of the Allied Health Professionals 2, which sounds like a sequel.
It is. What I would say with that is, really, compared to the AHP1 space, I would call them tweaks. So there are some things where there were classifications that were in it, but there were no descriptors. So people didn't know where to apply them. There were also some classifications that only applied to certain employers. Those restrictions have been lifted for a number of those. There are still some Peter Mac specific classifications that will still only apply to them. But broadly speaking, it does open up some avenues for people to reclassify if they do have that work at that hospital.
So those are the ones that used to be called UG3 and other classifications?
Correct.
And in terms of the classification structure, the actual descriptors themselves have been the subject of some modification and some consolidation.
Yes, correct. So the consolidation has really come from a point of trying to get some consistency across the occupations, which are in the agreement now called professions. So previously the professional groups had different grade 2 descriptors, different grade 3 descriptors, and also different grade 4 descriptors, and the grade 4 descriptor only applied to a certain number of classifications. So we did a lot of consolidation to streamline the relevant descriptors to ensure consistency across the different professions.
So instead of having 8 or 9 different definitions for what a grade 2 is depending on the profession, there's a single definition.
There are some exceptions to that when it comes to some of the more technological classifications. So say, for example, sonography, and then also the radiation therapists.
We also had that issue that the previous agreement had grade 4 classifications for some occupations or for some professions and not others, and nobody seemed to know why that was.
Yes, correct. I think over time it may be that it wasn't applicable because they were such small groups, but obviously over time the professions have expanded, which means that if people are doing that grade 4 work, regardless of the profession, they should be paid for that relevant work. But again, employers need to know that they have to be doing that role.
So with the exception of the advanced practice and the changes in that chief or the former chief area, do you anticipate major changes between grades as a result of the classification changes?
No, it's expected to be minimal, because what we've done with the grade 2 classification is that we have used the most common examples of additional responsibilities when we've consolidated those. So it should hopefully only be minimal because it is in the streamlined space across professions. With the grade 3 and 4 descriptors, although it does have, I guess, access to certain streams, that depends on how the work is allocated at the employer. So some people will or won't choose to allocate work in a certain stream, or they may have people working across the streams. But the base descriptor that the employees have to meet at the top of the classification structure for each group is quite similar to what the current agreement is. Some of the minor differences is that the grade 3 classification structure used to say that an employee had to have at least 7 years experience. Now the classification structure has been changed to say will normally have 7 years experience. So what that means is that some health services may have some grade 2s doing grade 3 work, but they have, say for example, 6 years of experience. Some health services may be saying, well, yes, we understand you're doing a grade 3 role, but under the current structure, you have to have 7 years of experience. Because you've only got 6 years, you can't go to a grade 3. Now, in that instance, that will cause a reclassification under the new agreement because they're doing the work of the grade 3. It's not about the amount of experience that they have.
It's a really good example where the change in the grade arises from the fact that the work value is the same and that there was an artificial impediment with regards to being classified in accordance with the work.
Yes, that's correct.
It's probably worth emphasising that employers will need to consider the updated classification structure to ensure that people are appropriately classified. And if somebody was wrongly classified under the old agreement, then they'll be incorrectly classified under the new agreement, and that should be rectified.
Yes, there will be a big process of checking the current classification against the new classification, but also just making sure, well, what work do we require these people to do? What are they doing so that they can be appropriately graded under the new structure?
So notwithstanding that it's been a little while since we lodged the agreement and that we're awaiting a hearing date, what work will there be to do during the life of this agreement?
So during the life of the agreement, we, like all the other enterprise agreements, have the Service Delivery Partnership Plan.
The SDPP?
Yes, that is correct. So we've got to work on that. Then we also have the health promotion structure. So in the negotiations, we were unable to reach an agreement on that. So we need to do that during the life of the agreement. And then we also need to work on the occupational health and safety issues at improving what they might be specific to allied health professionals.
So I think there has been a history with previous agreements of identifying work to be done.
Yes.
That hasn't necessarily materialised, but we have some structures in place to make that different this time.
Yes, what we're doing is we're keeping our reference groups open during the life of the agreement, and we've got one coming up. So we will be talking about the structure, but what's important is we will have different implementation issues arising throughout the life, and keeping tags on those to work out what we might need to do and what might need to be developed for health services in relation to implementation of the agreement.
I think keeping those reference groups is going to be really crucial in terms of working on particular issues. It will then give us something to report back to members more broadly about the progress of those issues.
Yes.
And just in terms of implementation tools, where are we up to for implementation tools for the Allied Health Professionals Agreement?
So with some of the implementation tools that we've already got, we've got the implementation guide, and then we've got the summary of changes document that we did that went to employees when the voting material was issued. Then we've also got our copy of the presentations that we did last year.
Those are the EBA forums?
Correct.
So those are available on video from our website?
Yes, correct. All of the information that I've just gone through is available on our website. So with the forums, it's available on the video links. With the relevant implementation guide, that is under the supplementary information when you click on the current Allied Health Professionals Agreement, which is the 2011 to 2015.
And just in terms of that implementation guide, that's something that we are utilising for each of the agreements, but just in terms of the process for developing an implementation guide.
So the process that we did with going through the implementation guide was we first drafted one and we consulted with a small group of members and also with VHIA.
And the idea behind that is that the implementation guide is something that is not a subject of controversy. It's something that has the support from members who have been consulted, but also that we've had the input, the valuable input of VHIA.
Yes, correct.
And in terms of translation, I guess that's probably the other key component for those who are seeking to calculate back pay.
Yes, so what we've been working on is a translation document, which is more from a payroll perspective. So we've been doing that, so it's got the pay codes on there that will show old pay code to new pay code plus the salary rates. So we've developed that will be sent with the salary circular, and again that has gone through a process of consultation with VHIA and our members.
Okay, so it may well be that we do perhaps another one of these sessions that concentrates really on the classification structure process. Is that something we could do?
Yes, I think it would be a very good idea.
Okay, so if people haven't done so already, they can get updates with regards to the progress of this agreement by selecting this group on the VHIA community app.
They can. What I have been doing recently is uploading what's been happening in terms of the information I've said to you is up on the app, that we've followed up the Commission and they've given us a time frame. All of those things are currently up on the app.
So the best way to get information as it happens is to sign up to the app and to select this group.
Yes.
Emma, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.